The rain hammered against the pavement like 1,000 fists demanding entry. November in Chicago. The kind of cold that doesn't just freeze your skin but reaches down into your chest and wraps around your heart. The neon signs of Rosa's diner bled red and blue across the wet asphalt, casting shadows that seemed alive, moving, hunting. Alessandro Moretti stood motionless beneath the awning of a closed pawnshop across West Division Street. His Bryony suit, the one that cost $8,000, the one that had been tailored in Milan by a man who died before finishing the final button, was soaked through. Water dripped from his dark hair, slicked back from a face that could have been carved from stone. His hands trembled at his sides. Hands that had signed documents ending men's lives. Hands that commanded armies. Hands that shook like a frightened child's. 18 months. For 18 months, Alessandro Moretti had turned Chicago inside out. Every street from the Loop to Cicero belonged to him, and he had used every inch of that empire to search for one small girl. His daughter. Lily. Stolen during a custody battle that ended in blood and fire and a silence so complete it swallowed his ability to breathe. And now she stood 30 feet away. Under the diner's broken awning, where rain poured through in sheets like a punishment from God himself, stood a 7-year-old girl in a pink coat 3 sizes too small. The coat hung off her shoulders like something borrowed from a ghost. Her lips were blue. Her small body shook with a violence that had nothing to do with cold and everything to do with sickness. Alessandro could see it from across the street. The way she swayed. The way her breath came out in shallow gasps. The way her eyes, his eyes, the exact same grey-blue, seemed to look through the world instead of at it. His feet were concrete. His breath was glass in his throat. Then the diner door opened. A woman emerged into the rain. Late 20s, maybe younger, it was hard to tell because hardship had aged her in ways that time alone could not. Her coat was thrift store, the kind you bought for $5 because it was better than nothing. Her shoes had holes in the toes. One of them, the left one, had duct tape holding the sole to the upper. Her hair was dark, pulled back with what looked like a piece of string. Her eyes were brown, the color of coffee without cream, and they held a kindness so complete that Alessandro felt something in his chest splinter. She stopped when she saw the child. Then she knelt. Slowly, deliberately, she knelt in the freezing rain without hesitation. Her knees hit cold concrete. Water soaked through her jeans. She reached up and unwrapped the thin scarf from her own neck, a threadbare thing that provided almost no warmth, the kind of scarf you wore because you had nothing else, and wrapped it around the child's neck with the tenderness of someone handling something sacred. "Hi there, sweetheart," the woman said. Her voice trembled, but it was steady. Steady in a way that suggested she had learned long ago how to hide fear. "What's your name?" The child didn't answer. Just shivered harder. The woman reached into her coat pocket. Alessandro watched her fingers emerge with 2 crumpled dollar bills. That was all she had. He could see it in her face, in the way she hesitated for only a fraction of a second before pressing those dollars into the child's frozen hands. "Get something warm inside," the woman said. "The chicken soup. Tell them Clara sent you. Tell them you need extra crackers." Clara. Her name was Clara. Across the street, Alessandro Moretti's vision blurred. His hands, which had never trembled in moments of violence or danger, shook so badly he had to clench them into fists. This stranger, this woman in worn-out shoes with holes in the toes, this woman with $2 and a kindness that should not exist in a world as brutal as this one, just gave his daughter everything she owned. While he, with his millions and his soldiers and his power, stood paralyzed behind a pawnshop window. Clara pushed the child gently toward the diner door. "Go on. Hurry before it closes." The girl moved. Slowly, uncertainly, but she moved. She stepped into the warmth of the diner and disappeared. Clara stood alone in the rain for another moment. She looked down at her bare neck, at the space where her scarf had been. Then she turned and walked back toward the darkness, toward the residential streets where the poorest people in Chicago tried to survive on nothing. Alessandro watched her go. His lieutenant, Tony Gianelli, appeared from the shadows like a ghost materializing from fog. Tony had been Alessandro's right hand for 15 years. He was a large man, 6'3", with shoulders that could fill a doorway. His suit was perfect. His shoes were polished. His watch was worth more than most people's houses. "Boss," Tony said. His voice was careful. "That was her." "That was her," Alessandro said. "And the woman?" "Nobody." Tony said nothing. In the rain-soaked silence, the weight of what had just happened seemed to settle between them like a stone sinking through water. And nobody had shown more love to Alessandro Moretti's daughter in 30 seconds than the entire Moretti empire had managed in 18 months of searching. "What do you want to do?" Tony asked. Alessandro's jaw clenched. "Find her," he said. His voice came out like gravel being crushed under a tire. "I want to know everything. Where she works. Where she sleeps. Who hurt her. Who made her so thin you can see her ribs through her clothes. I want to know what made her give away her last $2. And the girl. Watch her. Close. From now until I understand what is happening, I want someone in that diner every hour. If she sneezes wrong, I want to know about it." Tony nodded and disappeared back into the rain. Alessandro stood alone again, staring at the diner window where warmth glowed like a promise of something better. What he did not know was that the woman who had just walked into the darkness carried a wound deeper than his own. That she had not eaten a full meal in 4 days. That the $2 she gave away was truly, literally, all the money she had left in the world. That in 5 days, the child she had just met would need surgery that cost $300,000. Money that Clara Reynolds would never have in 1,000 lifetimes of working double shifts and eating leftovers from garbage cans. What he did not know was that someone else was also watching. Someone with a sick obsession and a restraining order that meant nothing to the corrupt cops in his pocket. Someone named Robert Hargrove who had been stalking Clara for 3 years, waiting for the moment when she would have something he could take from her. And what neither Clara nor Alessandro knew was that Margaret Harrington, the wealthy, ice-cold matriarch of the family Clara worked for as a live-in nanny, sleeping in a converted closet for $300 a week, had already decided that this child would belong to her. That the Harringtons would claim her. That Clara's reputation would be destroyed in the process. The rain continued to fall. Heavy. Relentless. Cold. 3 days earlier, Clara Reynolds was still invisible to everyone except the children she loved. Her alarm did not go off at 5 in the morning because she did not own an alarm clock. Instead, she woke to the sound of her own breathing, to the knowledge that time had passed, to the weight of another day arriving that she would need to survive. The converted closet in the Harrington mansion was 6 feet by 7 feet. A single mattress on the floor. A shelf she had built from scrap wood. A small lamp that flickered when the wind blew hard. That was everything she owned. That was her entire world. She lay still for a moment, feeling her body catalog its pain. Her lower back ached from 2 double shifts at the diner. Her hands were raw from scrubbing floors. Her left knee throbbed from where Robert had kicked her 3 weeks ago, before the police came and served the restraining order he ignored completely. She pushed herself up. Her body moved like something old and broken. The house was still dark when she made her way downstairs. The Harrington mansion occupied 2 full blocks in Lincoln Park. Crystal chandeliers. Persian rugs. Oil paintings of ancestors who had never worked a day in their lives. Marble staircases that seemed to stretch toward heaven. And somewhere in the East Wing, Margaret Harrington slept in a bedroom larger than Clara's entire apartment had been, back when she still had an apartment. Clara moved through the kitchen like a ghost. Silent. Efficient. She made coffee for Margaret, dark roast, imported from Brussels, $200 a pound. She did not drink any herself. She made eggs, real eggs, free range, the kind that cost $3 each. She did not eat any herself. Then she sat at the small table in the corner of the kitchen where the help were permitted to sit, and she counted her money. $2.17. She had bills due Friday. Her phone bill. The remaining balance on a medical debt from 7 years ago. Child support she was meant to be paying but couldn't, because she had no children, because that had been a lie Robert had convinced her was true, because Robert had convinced her of many things before she finally understood that he was a lie wrapped in human skin. $2.17. She had learned how to survive on nothing. How to make tea from hot water and imagination. How to go hungry in ways that were not visible. How to smile at the Harrington children when she taught them their numbers, even though she had not eaten breakfast. How to braid hair with steady hands even though those hands shook sometimes when she thought about the next bill, the next eviction notice, the next time someone would look at her as if she was less than human. Her phone buzzed. A text from her friend Lisa, who also worked at Rosa's diner. Slow night tomorrow. Can you come in at 4 p.m.? Clara typed back with her thumbs, yes. Because every shift mattered. Every $2 tip mattered. Every hour counted toward something, even if she did not know what that something was. By 7 in the morning, Margaret Harrington would wake and demand breakfast. Clara would serve it. By 8, the Harrington children, twins, age 5, born into a world that would hand them everything, would come down in their school uniforms. Clara would make sure their hair was perfect and their backpacks were packed and they knew they were loved by at least one person in this house. By 9, Clara would start the laundry. 16 loads per week. All the sheets from 5 bedrooms. All the towels from 4 bathrooms. All the clothes from people who changed outfits the way Clara changed her socks. By noon, she would have worked for hours without sitting down. By 5 in the afternoon, she would leave the Harrington house and walk to Rosa's diner, where she would work until 2 in the morning, carrying plates and pouring coffee and smiling at men who grabbed her ass and women who did not leave tips. By 3 in the morning, she would walk home through the dark streets of Chicago, her feet aching, her body demanding sleep, her mind refusing to stop calculating how many more shifts, how many more hours, how many more years before things got better. By 5 in the morning, she would lie down on a mattress on the floor of a converted closet and close her eyes. And then the day would start again. This was what it meant to be invisible. This was what it meant to be nobody. She did not know that in 3 days, she would meet a child who would change everything. She did not know that the man who controlled Chicago would be watching from across a rain-soaked street. She did not know that her $2 would matter more than all of his millions. All she knew was that it was Thursday morning, she had $2.17, and she was still alive. For now, that was enough. If you are still watching, you are someone who understands that the greatest love stories are not written in palaces or told by the powerful. They are lived in silence, in closets, in the rain, by people the world has decided do not matter. Drop a like if this story speaks to your heart. Subscribe now so you never miss what happens next. And share this with someone who needs to remember that being invisible does not mean being unworthy. Now let us return to that November night, because everything that happens next will change who Clara Reynolds believes she is. The closet was not a room. It was a box. 7 feet by 4 feet, with a twin mattress on the floor that sagged in the middle where Clara Reynolds had slept for 8 months, and a plastic storage bin in the corner holding 3 identical uniforms, pressed and ready. No window. No light switch that worked. When she woke at 5:47 in the morning, before the alarm on her phone could scream at her, the darkness was still complete, the kind of darkness that lives in places where sunlight is not allowed to reach. She lay there for exactly 90 seconds. That was the time she allowed herself, 90 seconds to remember that her name was Clara Reynolds, that she was 29 years old, that she had been a wife once and was no longer. The mattress groaned as she sat up, her spine cracking in sequence like kindling catching fire. Her hands found the small table beside the bed, the phone, the photograph in its cracked frame. Even in the dark, her fingers knew where it was. Marcus, smiling at her from 5 years ago, his hair still dark, his eyes still warm, before the cancer came looking for him like a knife through everything they had built together. She did not allow herself to cry. Her tears had long since dried up somewhere between the hospital bills and the foreclosure notice and the day she moved into a closet owned by people who did not remember her name unless they needed something. The Harrington mansion lived above her head like a creature with 1,000 eyes. 32 rooms on Lakeshore Drive, where the windows were floor to ceiling and the marble floors were so polished you could see your own worthlessness reflected back at you. Clara had memorized the house in her bones. The kitchen with its sub-zero refrigerator that hummed like a satisfied beast. The nursery on the 3rd floor where the twins slept under a canopy that cost more than her annual salary. The sitting room where Margaret Harrington held court like a general surveying a battlefield, her diamond earrings catching the light, her voice thin and cutting as a blade. She climbed the servants' stairs at 6:15. Nobody used these stairs except her. The main staircase curved through the center of the mansion like the spine of something alive and expensive, all Italian marble and mahogany banister. But Clara took the narrow staircase at the back, the one that wound between walls, where the servants had always gone, invisible by design. The kitchen smelled like fresh espresso and the cook's cigarettes. Rosa, the house cook, was already there, 70 years old with hands scarred from 40 years of cooking for wealthy people who rarely thanked her. Rosa did not look up when Clara entered. She never did. They had an understanding that stretched back 8 months. You did your work, you did not complain, you did not ask for things, you remained in the background like the appliances. Clara made the twins breakfast. Organic oatmeal with blueberries imported from Vermont. Cut apple slices arranged in a pattern, because presentation mattered in this house. Whole milk poured into matching cups with small silver spoons. Everything perfect. Everything invisible. At 7 o'clock, she climbed the grand staircase with the breakfast tray, her eyes on the marble steps, her footsteps careful and quiet. The twins' room was on the 3rd floor, a space larger than most apartments, with a window that looked out over Lake Michigan. The water was slate gray this morning, the sky pressing down like a stone lid. Emma and James were already awake, waiting. Emma, age 6, with her mother's blonde hair twisted into careful braids by Clara's own hands the night before. James, age 4, rubbing his eyes with small fists, his pajamas covered in dinosaurs. They did not call her Mom. They called her Clara. Margaret had made that clear on the first day. They already have a mother, Clara. You are staff. But when Emma wrapped her small arm around Clara's leg and buried her face in her hip while James climbed into her lap and demanded stories about the castle and the princess and the dragon that was secretly good, nobody was watching. In those moments before the day fractured, Clara was not invisible. She was necessary. She was loved. At 8:30, Margaret appeared in the doorway, her voice arriving before her body did, that sharp sound like ice breaking on a frozen pond. Clara! A word. The twins were already seated at the small table in their room, eating. Margaret stood in the doorway wearing a cream-colored dress, her posture suggesting that she had never, in her entire life, slouched. She was 53 years old but moved like a woman who had fought death and won, her face pulled tight, her eyes like chips of blue ice, her blonde hair the color of something artificial. The children are becoming too attached to you, Margaret said, not stepping into the room, maintaining the threshold like a boundary. I've noticed it. Jane's asking for you when I come to read him stories. Emma telling her friends at school that you're her favorite person. It's not appropriate. Clara kept her eyes on the twins' plates, making sure there was enough juice, that James had not dropped blueberries on the floor. Yes. Your staff, Clara. Not family. It's important they understand the difference. Otherwise they develop expectations. And expectations lead to disappointment. Yes. Margaret left the way she had arrived, her footsteps clicking on the marble, crisp and controlled. Clara did not look up until she heard the sound of a door closing somewhere in the distance. Emma was watching her with the eyes of a 6-year-old who already understood that the world was divided into people who belonged and people who served. She set down her spoon. Will you leave too? The question was a knife. Simple. Sharp. Devastating. No, baby, Clara said, and she knelt beside Emma's chair and pulled her close, breathing in the smell of her hair, the specific warmth of her small body. "I will not leave." But as she said it, she wondered if it was a promise she could keep. Wednesday evening came like a reprieve. Clara had negotiated this one thing when she took the job, 2 hours, every Wednesday and Sunday, to volunteer at Mercy House Shelter on the South Side. Margaret had only agreed because the Harringtons Foundation made donations, because Clara's volunteer hours looked good in the annual report. Tax purposes. Charity as currency. Even Clara's goodness could be converted into something useful for the people who owned everything. The shelter smelled like industrial cleaner and human desperation and the specific scent of wet coats drying under fluorescent light. 30 people occupied the common room on this particular Wednesday, families crowded onto plastic chairs, teenagers with the hollow eyes of the already defeated, elderly men and women who had somehow become disposable, the way society discarded people like broken machinery. The radiator hissed in the corner, struggling. The lights flickered every 30 seconds with a sound like insects dying. Mrs. Pacheco, the director, was 58 years old and had stopped sleeping regularly sometime around her 40th birthday. Her hands trembled slightly, not from age but from exhaustion and the weight of never having enough. "Clara! Thank God! We have 7 new arrivals since Sunday and no blankets." Clara had brought supplies, blankets from the Harringtons' linen closet, the ones with small stains that Margaret had declared unsuitable. Peanut butter sandwiches made from the kitchen's leftovers. Oranges from a bag that Rosa had set aside without being asked. These small rebellions, these quiet thefts of abundance, were how Clara stayed alive inside the mansion. She was not stealing. She was redistributing. She was saying no to a world that insisted some people mattered and others did not. As she began sorting blankets, laying them across the back of chairs, a small voice cut through the ambient noise of the shelter. "She's new," Mrs. Pacheco said quietly, nodding toward the corner. The girl sat alone, separated from the cluster of other children, her body curled into itself, her small hands clutching a stuffed rabbit so ancient it barely held its shape. She was 7, maybe 8, with dark hair that had not been brushed in days and skin so pale it looked translucent, like something left too long without sun. But it was her breathing that caught Clara's attention. Shallow. Rapid. With a small catching sound, like her lungs were filled with something thick and resistant. Clara crossed the room slowly. The girl watched her approach with eyes that were too old, too knowing, too sad for someone who had not yet finished growing. "What's your rabbit's name?" Clara asked, kneeling to the girl's level. "Hope." The word was barely a whisper, fractured at the edges. Clara sat down beside her, not touching, giving the child space. "That's a good name." "I'm Clara." "I know. You come here a lot." "This is my 2nd time." The girl did not offer more. Mrs. Pacheco had warned Clara about this one. "Won't tell us her last name. Been here 2 weeks. Coughs all night. We think she's been exposed to something, mold, maybe, or respiratory infection. But we can't get her to a doctor and we don't have insurance paperwork because she won't tell us anything about her family." Clara opened the sandwich bag and offered one to the girl. Hope, because what else could you call a child with that name, took it and held it without eating, looking down at it like it was something fragile that might break. "Is it okay?" Clara asked. "It's good," the girl said. I'm not very hungry." But she was hungry. Clara could see it in the way her eyes moved over the sandwich, the way her small shoulders curved inward like she was protecting a secret wound. The cough came then, a dry sound that shook her entire body, her fist pressed against her mouth, her other hand gripping the stuffed rabbit as if it could anchor her to the world. When it passed, she was trembling. "You should see a doctor," Clara said gently. "That sounds serious." "Nobody takes kids like me to doctors," Hope said. And then, in a voice so quiet it was almost inaudible, "Everyone else leaves. People always leave." Clara did not have a response for that. The truth was too large and too heavy. Instead, she sat with the girl through the evening, brought her water, listened to her cough, watched her slowly eat half the sandwich. When it was time to leave, Clara made a decision that cost her money she did not have. Thursday morning, before work, she stopped at the Goodwill on Division Street and bought a real coat, navy blue, wool blend, only $2 because God was still sometimes kind, and left it at the shelter for hope, telling Mrs. Pacheco to give it to the girl without mentioning where it came from. What Clara did not know was that this girl had been missing for 540 days. That her real name was Lily Moretti. That in a mansion across the city, a man with scars and power and an empire built on fear had been searching for her every single day. That her heart was failing, cell by cell, moment by moment, and she had less than 120 hours left before the damage became irreversible. What Clara did not know was that Alessandro Moretti was watching. Not her. Not yet. But he was watching his men watch the shelter, watching the surveillance feeds, watching for any sign of the daughter who had become a ghost in his world. And in precisely 3 days, when the rain came down like a curse on Chicago, everything would change. The rain fell like needles that Saturday in November, each drop sharp enough to draw blood. Clara Reynolds stood outside Rosa's diner with her last $2 crumpled in her pocket and her stomach eating itself from the inside. 3 days. That's how long she'd stretched $17 across groceries, rent for her storage closet room, and the medicine Mrs. Pacheco needed for her cough at the shelter. She'd skipped breakfast. She'd skipped lunch. Her supervisor Margaret Harrington had finally released her for 2 hours, not a minute more, those thin lips had said, and Clara had used every second searching the November streets for a girl who'd run away from the only safe place she had. The park where Lily mentioned playing years ago had been empty except for trash and broken glass. The abandoned lot behind the gas station held nothing but puddles and rats. The library was closing, its doors locked against the storm. Then Clara remembered what Lily had whispered one afternoon while they sat together counting pills. Her puppy used to take her for hot chocolate at Rosa's diner. That memory brought her here, to this corner on the south side where the awning leaked and the neon sign buzzed like something dying. She found Lily in the rain. The child stood alone under the broken overhang, soaked through, her small body shaking so violently her teeth chattered audibly. Her lips had turned blue. Her fingertips were white as bone. She was burning up with fever but freezing with cold, her 7-year-old body unable to reconcile the signals it was receiving. Clara dropped to her knees on the wet concrete without thinking. "Oh, sweetheart. Oh, baby." She pulled Lily against her chest, and the child let out a sob so raw it sounded like something breaking inside her. "I wanted to find my papa," Lily gasped, her breath ragged. "He used to bring me here for hot chocolate. But I can't remember his face anymore. I tried so hard to remember and I can't." Clara's heart didn't just break. It shattered into pieces so small they could never be reassembled. She unwound her own scarf, the only warm thing she owned, and wrapped it around Lily's neck. Her hands moved with desperate precision, tucking the fabric under the child's chin, covering her ears. Then Clara reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the $2 bills. Her last $2. The money that was supposed to feed her for 2 more days. The money that was supposed to keep her alive until Monday when her paycheck arrived. She pressed the crumpled bills into Lily's frozen hands. "Go inside," Clara said, her voice steady even though her entire body shook. "Tell them Clara sent you. Ask for the chicken soup. Tell them to make it warm. Can you do that for me?" Lily nodded, her eyes enormous and terrified and so sick. "I'm calling for help," Clara whispered. "I'll be right back. I promise." What Clara didn't know was that across the street, hidden beneath the pawnshop awning where the shadows were deep enough to hide a man and his secrets, Alessandro Moretti watched everything. He'd received an anonymous tip 4 hours earlier, a shelter worker who recognized the girl from the missing posters that had circulated through Chicago's underworld for 18 months. For 540 days, Alessandro had searched. His men had turned the city inside out. They'd followed leads that went nowhere, interrogated people who knew nothing, followed up on sightings that turned out to be other children, other ghosts. He'd come alone this time. Without Tony or Enzo. Without the full extraction team. Because the waiting had become unbearable and he needed to see it with his own eyes first. Now he stood in the rain, watching a stranger, a woman in a coat held together by hope and patches, save his daughter while he stood paralyzed. She had nothing. He could tell by the way she moved, by the worn edges of her clothes, by how she'd given away her last resources without hesitation. She had less than nothing, and she'd poured it into a child who wasn't hers. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Tony, boss, location confirmed. Extraction team 2 minutes out. But Alessandro didn't move. He watched Clara lead Lily into the diner. He watched her sit the child down at a booth by the window. He watched her lean across the table with desperate hand gestures, trying to communicate with a counterman she clearly couldn't pay, her mouth forming words he couldn't hear but could somehow understand. Please help her. She's sick. She needs warmth. The counterman's expression shifted. He nodded. He started moving toward the kitchen. Something cracked open inside Alessandro Moretti's chest, something that had been frozen solid since the night his daughter disappeared. Something that all the money in the world and all the power he wielded couldn't fix or force or buy back. 2 hours later, the pediatric emergency room at Northwestern Memorial smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed their constant, maddening song. Nurses moved past in shoes that squeaked on linoleum floors. Clara sat in a plastic chair outside room 347, her clothes still damp, her body folded into itself. Inside that room, Lily slept with tubes running into her small arms and monitors tracking the failing rhythm of her heart. The ER doctor's words kept repeating in Clara's mind: congenital heart condition. Bicuspid aortic valve with severe stenosis. She needs surgery within 5 days or the valve fails completely. Cost? Clara had asked, though she already knew she couldn't afford the answer. $300,000. $300,000. Clara had 17 cents in her bank account. She had a storage closet. She had clothes she'd bought from Goodwill for $2 each. She had a photo of her dead husband that she kept folded in her pocket like a prayer card. She could sell everything she owned and maybe get $2,000. She could beg Margaret Harrington for an advance, but Margaret looked at her the way you'd look at a stain on expensive fabric, with disgust and the irritation of having to deal with its removal. She could. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. The air in the hallway changed. Not dramatically. Not with thunder or lightning. It changed the way air changes when a predator enters a space. The nurses found urgent business elsewhere. The security guard near the bathrooms suddenly needed to make a phone call. Alessandro Moretti stepped into the hallway. He was 6 feet 2 inches of controlled violence in a black suit that cost more than Clara made in a month. His dark hair was pushed back from his face. His jaw was carved from marble. A thin scar ran through his left eyebrow like a blade through water. Behind him came 2 men built like brick walls. Both armed. Both watching the world with the flat, dangerous eyes of men who hurt people for a living. Tony and Enzo exchanged a glance they'd perfected over 15 years of working for Alessandro Moretti. This was not their boss in his normal state. This was their boss barely holding onto the edges of control. Alessandro stopped 10 feet from Clara's chair. "You're the woman from the diner," he said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel wrapped in silk, like a sound that could break bones. Clara stood slowly, her body moving on instinct alone. She positioned herself between him and Lily's room. "Who are you?" "The girl inside. Her name is Lily Moretti." He paused, and his throat worked as if the next words were difficult to swallow. "She's my daughter." The hallway tilted around Clara. "I've been looking for her every day for 18 months, Alessandro continued. "I watched you tonight. At the diner. You gave her your last money." "She needed it more than I did," Clara said. "Why?" His eyes were dark and searching. "You don't know her. You have nothing. Why would you?" Because she's a child, Clara interrupted, her voice steady despite the trembling in her bones. Because she was cold and alone and scared. Because that's what you do when someone needs help. For 15 seconds, Alessandro Moretti could not speak. Tony and Enzo exchanged another glance. In 15 years, they had never seen him like this. The doctor says she needs surgery, Clara continued, rushing the words before her courage failed. $300,000 in 5 days. I don't have that. But I'll find a way. I'll sell everything, work 3 jobs, I'll. Stop. His voice cracked. Just stop. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were glistening like wet stone. I can pay for the surgery. I can pay for anything she needs. Clara studied him, this dangerous man who looked like he was being torn apart from the inside. Then why didn't you go to her? You were watching. Why didn't you just? Because I was terrified. The words came out broken, raw. Because for 18 months I've imagined finding her, and now that she's here, I don't know if she'll remember me. I don't know if she'll forgive me for losing her. He turned away, one hand braced against the wall. His shoulders shook. Tony and Enzo stood frozen, their weapons useless against this kind of pain. After a moment that stretched like hours, Clara gestured to the chair beside her. Alessandro sat down slowly, like a man made of glass, like he might shatter if he moved too quickly. Why do you care so much about children who aren't yours? He asked quietly. Clara pulled out the photograph she kept in her coat pocket. It was worn, creased from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. A man with kind eyes and a bright smile stared back at them. My husband, Marcus. He died 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. We were trying to have a baby when he got diagnosed. We never got the chance. Her voice was steady but her hand shook. So I pour everything into other people's children. The kids I nanny for. The kids at the shelter. Lily. Because I can't save my own family, but maybe I can save someone else's. Alessandro stared at the photo, then at Clara. How much do the Harringtons pay you? $2,400 a month. You live with them. In a storage closet. 7 feet by 4 feet. No windows. Next to the laundry room. His jaw clenched. And they let you sleep there while they live in. Marble and chandeliers and rooms they don't even use, Clara finished. But I need the job. I have medical debt. My husband's treatment cost $127,000. I'm still paying $900 a month. Alessandro's hands curled into fists on his knees. When he spoke, his voice was lethal quiet. What are their names? These people who treat you like... A phone buzzed. Clara's phone. She pulled it out. Unknown number, I know where you are. We need to talk. You can't hide from me forever. Robert. Her face went pale. Alessandro noticed. What is it? Nothing, Clara lied, but her voice broke. Tell me. It wasn't a request. My ex-boyfriend, Clara whispered. Robert Hargrove. We broke up 8 months ago after he broke my wrist. I have a restraining order, but his cousin is a sergeant in the 14th district. The cops ignore my calls. Alessandro's expression went arctic cold. He stood. He pulled out his phone. He walked 3 steps away and spoke quietly to Tony, find everything on Robert James Hargrove. Employment, address, bank accounts, parking tickets, everything. I want it in 1 hour. Boss, Tony said carefully, we don't even know this woman. Alessandro turned and looked at Clara sitting small and scared in her plastic chair, her damp coat, her worn shoes, her kind eyes that had saved his daughter when he couldn't. Now we do, he said quietly. Meanwhile, across the city in a Lakeshore Drive mansion, Margaret Harrington sat in her study with her lawyer on speakerphone. The nanny has been stealing food, Margaret said, her voice cool as ice. I have it on camera. She's also been absent without permission multiple times. I want her destroyed. Find a way to get her arrested. Theft from employer should be criminal, shouldn't it? The lawyer hesitated. Mrs. Harrington, if she was taking leftovers. I don't care. She's getting too attached to the children. They cry when she leaves. That's unacceptable. Eliminate her. She hung up and sipped her wine. What Margaret didn't know was that Clara had already entered the protection of the most dangerous man in Chicago. In room 347, Lily woke to see Clara standing beside her bed. Clara, the child whispered. I'm here, sweetheart. Then Lily saw the man in the doorway. His eyes. His face. Something in her small body recognized him even though her mind couldn't. Papa. Alessandro moved forward on shaking legs and knelt beside the bed. He took his daughter's hand with the tenderness of someone handling something sacred. Bella. My Lily. I've been looking for you everywhere. Lily started crying. I couldn't find you. I tried but I couldn't remember. Sure, I'm here now. I'm here. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her hands. Tears streamed down his face. Lily reached out and grabbed Clara's hand. Don't go. Please don't go. Alessandro looked up at Clara. Stay. Please. So Clara stayed. And for the next hour, the three of them sat together in that hospital room while November rain hammered the windows, a ruthless mafia boss, a powerless nanny, and the child who had bound them together with invisible threads stronger than steel. Outside, the city waited. Threats gathered in the darkness. But inside room 347, there was only the sound of rain and a child's breathing and the beating of a heart that still had 5 days left to learn how to survive. The parking garage was a tomb of concrete and echoing footsteps. Fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the world look diseased. Clara's Honda Civic sat 6 rows back, a ghost of a car held together by prayer and duct tape. She had parked there at 11 in the evening, before visiting Lily one final time before the surgery. Before everything changed. Her footsteps clicked against the cold floor. One hand held her phone. The other held a coffee she hadn't touched, growing cold and bitter. Then a figure stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. Robert Hargrove. 6 feet tall, muscular from years of prison weightlifting, with eyes like chips of ice and a mouth that had never learned kindness. He wore a grey hoodie stretched tight across his chest, and the way he moved, unhurried, predatory, made Clara's entire body go rigid with ancient fear. "Hello, beautiful," he said. Clara took a step backward. "The restraining order says 500 feet, Robert. You think I care about a piece of paper?" He moved closer, his breathing loud in the silence. "I've been watching you. Saw you with that rich guy. The one with the suits and the security team. You moved up in the world, didn't you? Found yourself a sugar daddy to take care of you. Leave me alone." Clara's voice trembled like a candle in the wind. She reached for her car keys, but her hands shook so badly they clattered onto the concrete floor. Robert picked them up. Held them up, dangling them, his smile spreading like a poison. "We belong together, Clara. You know that. You're mine. Always have been. That little brat you've been playing mommy to, I could take her. I know where she is right now. I know how sick she is. One phone call to the right people and she disappears. Vanishes. Unless you come back to me. Tomorrow night. After the surgery. You come home or I make sure she never leaves that hospital alive." Clara's breath came in gasps. The garage tilted. Everything tilted. "You wouldn't. Try me." Robert stepped close enough that she could smell the cigarettes and energy drink on his breath. He dropped the keys at her feet and walked away, his footsteps echoing backward into the darkness, leaving her trembling and alone against the cold metal of her car. What Robert did not know was that Alessandro Moretti's security cameras covered every inch of that parking garage in high definition. What Robert did not know was that Tony was already uploading the footage to the cloud with the timestamp locked. What Robert did not know was that his life as he understood it had exactly 17 hours remaining. 6 hours before Lily's surgery, Margaret Harrington stood on the front steps of Northwestern Memorial Hospital in a cream Chanel suit that cost more than Clara's entire annual salary. Diamonds hung from her ears. Her makeup was perfect. Her smile was the smile of a predator who had never faced a consequence in her life. The news cameras were already there. Channel 7. She had called them herself. "I trusted Clara Reynolds with my children," Margaret said, her voice dripping with manufactured sadness as she dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. "With my home. With my family's privacy. And she repaid that trust by stealing from us. By embezzling funds meant for charity. By manipulating a sick child, a terminally ill child, for sympathy and financial gain. That poor girl, Lily. Clara has been collecting donations in her name. Thousands of dollars. And keeping it. For herself." The reporter leaned in. "You have evidence?" "Absolutely." Margaret's smile widened. "Bank transfers, security footage edited by our lawyers, a full financial audit. Everything. She's a predator. She preys on compassion. And she needs to be prosecuted." The broadcast went live at 9:06 in the morning. By 10:03, the story had been shared 6,000 times. By 10:15, hashtags began trending. By noon, Clara Reynolds' face was on every local news station in Chicago. But Alessandro Moretti was also watching. He sat in the chair beside Lily's hospital bed, holding his daughter's small hand, and he watched the broadcast on his phone. He watched Margaret Harrington smile. He watched the accusations multiply like a virus in the comment section. He watched Clara's life being systematically destroyed in real time by a woman who had never worked a day in her life. The rage that moved through him was ancient and bottomless. Clara was in the bathroom when she saw it. The bathroom that smelled like industrial soap and the particular terror of a life unraveling. She had come here to have 5 minutes alone. Just 5 minutes. But her phone kept buzzing. Messages. Comments. Tags. The comment section was a river of poison. She slid down the tile wall until she was sitting on the cold floor. The bathroom was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat, irregular and panicked. Through the wall, she heard the pre-op team outside Lily's room. Voices discussing anesthesia. Discussing bypass times. Discussing the 17% mortality rate for 7-year-olds undergoing emergency cardiac surgery. 17%. That meant Lily had an 83% chance of survival. That was good. That was almost certainly good. But it also meant that in roughly 1 hour, Clara might lose the only person in the world who had ever loved her back. She looked down at her phone. The Greyhound schedule was still open. 11:45 a.m. to Indianapolis. 3 hours to get to the station. She had $47 in her checking account. A bus ticket would cost $35. That would leave $12. She could start over. Again. Disappear into another city, another job, another life of invisible suffering. It's what she did. It's what she was good at. Her fingers hovered over the purchase button. Then, from down the hall, so small it barely traveled through the walls, Lily's voice. "Where's Clara? I want Clara. I want her here." Clara's hand stopped shaking. She looked at herself in the mirror. This woman had been beaten. Used. Thrown away. Lied about. Publicly humiliated. She had been invisible her entire life. But Lily saw her. Lily chose her. Lily loved her when no one else ever had. Clara stood up. Straightened her spine. Washed her face. And walked out of that bathroom with her head held high. Some people are worth burning for. When she returned to Lily's room, Alessandro took one look at her face and he knew. She had seen the broadcast. "It's all lies," he said immediately. His voice was steady. "Absolute. Every word. My lawyers are all ready." "I know it's a lie," Clara said. "But people believe her. She has money and lawyers and I have more." Alessandro's eyes were storm-dark and deadly. "I have considerably more money, more lawyers, and substantially less patience for people who hurt what's mine." Clara blinked. "I'm not." "You are." His voice could cut through steel. "You saved my daughter when I couldn't find her. You gave everything you had when I had everything and gave nothing. You are under my protection now, whether you accept it or not." At 11:17 in the morning, while Lily was being wheeled into the operating room, Alessandro made a single phone call to Tony. "Robert James Hargrove," he said. "Current location? Apartment on Western Avenue. His home. I want 12 men. Full tactical gear. No guns. I want him alive and conscious for what comes next." 40 minutes later, 12 men in black tactical gear moved up the stairwell of Robert's apartment building like ghosts. Their boots made no sound. At Tony's signal, Enzo kicked the door. The frame splintered. Robert was eating cereal in his boxers. When he saw them, he screamed. "Video evidence of you violating the restraining order," Tony said calmly, holding up a tablet. "Audio of you threatening a 7-year-old child. But that's not why we're here. You broke Clara Reynolds' wrist 8 months ago. You stalked her. You terrorized her. That ends today." 2 men forced Robert to his knees. He was shaking, tears streaming, his mouth open in terror. 47 calls to 911, Enzo said conversationally. 47 reports filed. 0 arrests. Because your cousin was the sergeant on duty. Your cousin, the dirty cop. Unfortunately for you, is currently being arrested in a coordinated federal raid happening right now, at this exact moment, across the city. The FBI agents came through the door with warrants and grim determination. They found 3 ounces of methamphetamine in Robert's bedroom closet. They found stolen car parts with intact VIN numbers in his storage unit. An anonymous tip had given them the exact locations. Robert collapsed into sobs as they cuffed him. "Federal charges," the lead agent said. "Distribution. Interstate trafficking. Violation of a federal restraining order. You're looking at 40 years minimum." Meanwhile, at the same moment, Margaret Harrington was being led out of her Lakeshore Drive mansion in handcuffs. Her cream Chanel suit was wrinkled. Her makeup ran in black streaks down her face. Red and blue police lights painted the marble facade of her home. An anonymous data dump had reached Channel 7 News. Complete financial records. 6 years of embezzlement. $2.3 million in offshore accounts. Footage of Margaret coaching her children to lie to CPS. Tax fraud. Bribing city officials. The very same news station that had broadcast her lies about Clara was now broadcasting her arrest live. Margaret Harrington, arrested at her home on 14 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and corruption, the anchor said. More details as we. By the time Margaret's husband filed for divorce, Margaret Harrington was trending worldwide. Her country club friends stopped returning her calls. The charities removed her name from their boards. Total destruction. Not death. Death would have been mercy. This was systematic annihilation. Clara watched from the hospital waiting room while Lily was still in surgery. Alessandro stood beside her. On the television mounted in the corner, Margaret Harrington was being led away in handcuffs. "You did this," Clara whispered. "They threatened you," Alessandro said simply. "They hurt you. That is unacceptable. But the FBI. Sometimes justice requires a little encouragement." His smile was dangerous and cold. "They were both guilty. I simply made sure the right evidence found the right people. Clara should have been terrified of this man and his power. Instead, she felt something she had never felt before in her entire life. She felt safe. The surgical nurse came through the double doors at 3:42 in the afternoon. She was smiling. "Lily made it through," she said. "The surgery went perfectly. Heart strong. She's going to be just fine." 3 weeks later, and December snow falls soft and clean over Chicago, each flake catching light like a blessing no one asked for. The mansion that once felt like a fortress now breathes with warmth. 15-foot pine trees stand in the main hall, and the smell of fresh evergreen mixes with cinnamon and vanilla, scents that belong to Christmas, to families, to things Clara never thought she would have. Lily runs through the halls, her footsteps no longer weak but strong, pink returning to her cheeks like color bleeding back into a photograph. Her laugh echoes off marble floors, and with every sound, something shifts inside Alessandro's chest. Something he thought had died when Sophia was stillborn. Something he thought the world had stolen from him forever. Enzo struggles with Garland while Tony pretends to be defeated by a tower of ornament boxes. Lily directs them with the authority of a general, pointing and laughing when Tony drops a strand of lights. The mansion feels alive in a way it never has. Clara hangs ornaments near the top of the tree where Lily cannot reach, her movements careful and deliberate, her hand occasionally brushing Lily's shoulder. She wears a simple sweater, pale gray, worn soft from washing. Her hair falls loose down her back. In the glow of 10,000 lights, she is beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with wealth or makeup or the kind of beauty that exists in magazine photographs. This is the beauty of someone who has survived. Of someone choosing to love anyway. Alessandro watches from the study doorway, his silhouette framed in shadow. 15 years of running an empire has taught him to see threats everywhere. To read danger in every face, every gesture, every moment of vulnerability. But watching Clara help Lily hang an ornament shaped like a star, he feels something he has no defense against. Not love. Not yet. But something like the beginning of love, the terrifying first moment before the avalanche starts. That night, after Lily is asleep in her room with Hope the golden retriever curled at the foot of her bed, Clara finds Alessandro in his study. The fire crackles and hisses. Snow falls outside the windows in thick, silent curtains. 2 glasses of wine sit untouched on the side table. Alessandro stands facing the fireplace, one hand braced against the mantel, his profile carved in shadow and firelight. "I want to tell you something," he says without turning. "Something I have never told anyone." Clara sits in the leather chair nearest the fire. She does not speak. She has learned that Alessandro's silences are not empty. They are full of things he is gathering the courage to say. "Her name was Sophia," he continues, his voice barely above a whisper. The name sounds like a prayer, like a curse, like the most precious and most painful word he has ever spoken. "My first daughter. She was born 3 years before Lily was stolen. I was 28 years old. My wife was terrified but happy. We painted the nursery pink and gold. We bought a crib with stars and moons carved into the wood. We bought dresses she would never wear." He turns to face Clara. Tears stream down his face. His men have never seen him cry. Marco and Enzo and Tony would not recognize this version of their boss, broken open, raw, exposed like a wound in winter air. "She was stillborn at 38 weeks, Alessandro says. The umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck. The doctor said it was random. Not his fault. Not my wife's fault. Just something that happens sometimes. A terrible accident of biology." His voice cracks. "I held her for 2 hours. She was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes. My wife's eyes. But she never took a breath. Not once. I sang to her. I told her my name. I told her how much I loved her, and she never even heard me." Clara's hand covers her mouth. Tears slide down her own face. "I never dismantled the nursery," Alessandro continues. It is still there, in the East Wing. Everything exactly as it was. The crib. The mobile with tiny stars. The dresses in the dresser. I go there sometimes and I say her name out loud because I am terrified that if I do not, I will forget how it sounds. I will forget how perfect she was. He wipes his eyes with the back of his hand. When Lily was stolen, I thought I was being punished. For something I did. Some order I gave. Some person I hurt. I thought God was taking my children from me because I did not deserve them. Because I built my empire on blood and fear, and this was justice. That is not how it works, Clara says, her voice firm even though she is crying. She stands and moves to sit beside him. Takes his hand. His scarred, dangerous, tender hand. Bad things happen to good people. Good things happen to bad people. There is no cosmic scorecard. There is just life. And loss. And the people who stay when everything falls apart. Alessandro looks at her with an intensity that makes her breath catch. Eyes like storm grey, like the sky before a hurricane, like every dangerous and beautiful thing she has ever feared. Why did you stay? He asks. After the news broadcast, after everything with Margaret, after discovering who I am and what I have done, you could have left. You could have taken Lily and disappeared. Why did you stay with me? Clara swallows. The fire pops and crackles. Outside, the snow falls heavier. Because Lily needed me, she says slowly. And because you saved me too. That night in the parking garage when Robert threatened me, when he came with that gun and that terrible smile, I was ready to give up. To let myself disappear. I had already disappeared inside myself so many times that I thought one more time would be permanent. She squeezes his hand. But you showed me that powerless does not mean worthless. That invisible does not mean forgotten. That I am worth protecting. That my life matters. Alessandro cups her face with his hands. These hands that have killed. These hands that have destroyed. These hands now trembling with a tenderness he thought he had buried with Sophia. You were never invisible to me, he says, his voice deep and solid like an oath. From the moment I saw you kneel in that rain and give away your last dollars to my daughter, you were the only thing I could see. They kiss. Slow and careful and full of broken pieces fitting together like a puzzle that was always meant to be whole. When they pull apart, Clara is crying, her tears mixing with his. I am terrified, she admits. Of this. Of you. Of losing either of you. I have already lost so much. What if I lose you too? What if? Me too, Alessandro interrupts. I am terrified every second. Every moment with you, I am afraid that I will somehow destroy this. That I will hurt you. That I will prove that I do not deserve to have a family. He brushes her tears away with his thumbs. But I am more terrified of not trying. Of waking up in 10 years and realizing I was too broken, too scared, too damaged to fight for the only person who has ever made me want to be better. They sit together in the firelight. No more words. Just the sound of the fire, of the snow falling against the windows, of two people breathing together in the dark. The next morning, Lily finds them asleep on the study couch. Clara's head rests on Alessandro's shoulder. His arm wraps around her waist. Their fingers are still intertwined. Lily climbs up between them, careful not to wake them, and whispers directly into Clara's ear. Are you going to be my mama now? Clara's eyes open. Meet Alessandro's. He nods slowly, a question and a promise all at once. Clara pulls Lily close, buries her face in the child's soft hair. If you want me to be. I do, Lily says simply. I love you. I loved you when you gave me your money in the rain and your hands were freezing. I loved you when you stayed at the hospital and held my hand. I love you forever and ever. Clara holds this child who chose her. This child she would die for without hesitation. And she knows with absolute certainty that this is her family. Not blood. Not biology. Not bound by the accidents of DNA. But choice. But presence. But the person who stays when the storm arrives. What neither of them knows yet is that family means fighting for each other. It means building something strong enough to survive anything. It means that the smallest act of kindness, $2 on a cold November night, can become the foundation of everything. 6 months later, June sun streams through the mansion windows, warm and golden. Lily runs through the garden, her golden retriever named Hope chasing her, both of them bright with joy. Clara wears a simple diamond ring on her left hand. They married quietly 3 weeks ago. The ceremony was small. Lily, Tony, Enzo, Mrs. Pacheco from the shelter, and Marcus's parents, who cried and told Clara that their son would have loved Alessandro, would have loved what he has become. The Harrington mansion has new nannies now, 3 of them, all paid fairly, all with real rooms. Margaret Harrington is 7 years into a 40-year federal sentence. Robert Hargrove is in a different facility, his violent obsession finally stopped, his 23 years stretching ahead like a punishment that fits the crime. Clara still volunteers at Mercy House every Wednesday, but now she brings Lily with her, delivering supplies in Alessandro's SUV driven by Tony. The shelter has a new wing, the Clara Reynolds Memorial Children's Center, funded by an anonymous donation of $2 million. On a warm June evening, they return to Rosa's diner. The same booth where it all began. Mr. Rosa brings hot chocolate, refuses payment. For the lady who gave everything she had, he says with a knowing smile. Lily drinks hers with chocolate on her upper lip, giggling. Alessandro holds Clara's hand across the table, his thumb tracing circles on her skin. Do you ever think about that night? He asks. The rain. The $2. Everything that came after. Every day, Clara admits. I think about how close I came to walking past her. I was so tired, so cold. My feet hurt. My heart hurt. I almost did not stop. But you did. But I did, she echoes. She looks at Lily, then at Alessandro, then at the life they have built from desperation and love and $2. I thought I had nothing to give. It turns out I had everything that mattered. Alessandro kisses her hand, and outside the diner window, the neon sign reflects in puddles from an afternoon rain. Some storms pass. But the family you build from them lasts forever. How did this story make you feel? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.